New research blows up the narrative that sea levels are catastrophically rising. We've been seeing the headlines for as long as we can remember. Our entire lives, we've been told about how the sea is rising at an alarming rate and it is going to flood the coastal areas of the world. Climate alarmists have been sounding the alarm for decades that the coastal areas where a majority of humankind currently lives will soon be over-inundated with permanent flooding that will soon turn these areas into tidal flats. And that many areas of the world will be uninhabitable, like Florida, due to rising sea levels. Yet new data is challenging this narrative, and suddenly what was previously unassailable fact is now in doubt, in question, and open to debate. New study released in June completely flies in the face of everything we've been told about the threat that sea level rise presents to humanity. DPI, Global Perspective on Local Sea Level Changes by Hessel-Wortman. This was submitted June 2025. Abstract. In 2021, the IPCC published new sea level projections. For the first time, the projections gave insight into expected relative sea level rise locally. A prudent designer of coastal infrastructure will want to know how the local projections compare to local observations. That comparison to date has not been made. We compare local projections and observations regarding the rate of rise in 2020. We used two data sets with local sea level information all over the globe. In both data sets, we found approximately 15% of the available sets suitable to establish the rate of rise in 2020. Geographic coverage of the suitable locations is poor, with the majority of suitable locations in the Northern Hemisphere. Latin America and Africa are severely underrepresented. Statistical tests were all run on selected data sets, taking acceleration of sea level rise as a hypothesis. In both data sets, approximately 95% of the suitable locations show no statistically significant acceleration of the rate of sea level rise. The investigations suggest the local non-climatic phenomena are a plausible cause of the accelerated sea level rise observed at the remaining 5% of the suitable locations. On average, the rate of rise projected by the IPCC is biased upwards, with approximately 2 millimeters per year in comparison with the observed rate. This peer-reviewed analysis of over 200 long-term tide gauge records spanning at least 60 years each from sources like Permanent Service for Mean Sea Level found no statistical significant global acceleration in sea rise. The average rate in 2020 was 1.5 millimeters per year, consistent with 20th century trends and roughly half the 3 to 4 millimeter year often cited in IPCC projections and the satellite-based estimates. The authors emphasize that regional variations are largely due to local factors like subsidence, not global climate-driven acceleration, and urge engineers to prioritize empirical data over models for coastal planning. So apparently, all of your hysterics, all of your freaking out, all of your crying, screaming, whining, obstructing, destroying, obfuscation of the truth was for nothing. Leftists, just like us conservatives always told you. So, considering that one of the core tenets of your entire ideology is false, what does that do to the rest of your ideology? How does that make you feel that you were lied to and manipulated by your leaders? How does it make you feel that us MAGA, us conservatives, us science skeptics were right all along? Doesn't feel good, does it? Too bad. Reality is reality. Facts don't give a fuck about your feelings. Part of the reason so many have been fooled is because the cherry picking of data by scientists and supposed scientists and supposed journalists. Look at this graph that's been widely disseminated as proof that Atlantic hurricanes have been making landfall more often. Now, obviously, this shows that starting in the year 2000, the rate of hurricanes making landfall increased exponentially. Since that first alarmist study only goes back to 1980, let's look at a study that goes back to 1900. it will clearly show that apart from a few anomalies, hurricanes have been making landfall about the same as the last century. No increase. Example number 2 of this cherry picking is the heat wave index, the heat wave graphs, showing that heat waves have increased exponentially in recent years. And since this graph only goes to the 1960s, let's look at a graph that goes to the 1890s. We see that heat waves peaked in the mid-30s. Wow. I just asked Google AI, point me to one example where it can be pinpointed to sea level rise alone that an island is uninhabitable. Look what Google AI had to admit. Based on scientific evidence, it is nearly impossible to find an island that has become uninhabitable due to sea level rise alone. As it is an interconnected process, land loss is consistently attributed to a combination of factors where sea level rise is a primary driver that is amplified by other natural and human-made issues. But you cannot provide me one example where it can be pinpointed to sea level rise alone. In all the world, there isn't one example. It is scientifically accurate to state that no such example exists where sea level rise can be pinpointed as the sole cause of an island becoming uninhabitable. Then we have this rather notorious attempt to debunk climate change science and sea level rise acceleration. You guys remember this, and this is the supposed fact check by AFP. Photo evidence against global warming, Statue of Liberty images do not disprove sea level rise. Photos taken 100 years apart. A reverse image search reveals the black and white picture featured in the post were taken circa 1900, according to the Museum of the City of New York. Meanwhile, the photo, supposedly taken in 2017, appears to be older. The earliest iteration of the picture AFP found online appeared in a 2012 blog post about sightseeing in New York City. Then it goes on to make the point, if the older image was taken at high tide and the newer one was taken at low tide, then that will of course mask average sea level rise. Then I asked Google, this article attempts to debunk the debunk of accelerated sea level rise by raising the issue that the photos taken a century apart showing little to no change in sea level rise against the Statue of Liberty could have been taken at different tide times. But can you show me an image showing a rise in sea level with photos taken at the same tide time around 100 years apart? Surely they exist. Search. Bet you can't. While it's difficult to find a pair of photos taken a century apart at the exact same tide time that visually demonstrates sea level rise, the scientific consensus, blah, 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 blah. But I was able to find this little image. This is an image of Fort Denison, a historic fort in Sydney Harbour, Australia. The picture to the left was taken 140 years ago. Do you guys notice any perceptible change at all? Here's a photo of Sugarloaf Island, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Look at the waterline. The top photo is from the 1880s, the second is 1910, the third is 2020. Don't you guys think it's odd that Google cannot find me one picture that exists on the entire internet showing a rise in sea levels? But I can easily find pictures proving the opposite? So I guess we're supposed to just take their word and not trust our own lying eyes. Yeah, no bueno, no trust. And it is because of experts like this that my trust levels are at historic lows.
Suggest to Dr. Maslowski that there is a 75% chance that the entire North Polar ice cap during some of the summer months could be completely ice-free within the next 5 to 7 years.
16 years later and against all expectations of the quote-unquote experts. Well, you can just call me a country bumpkin who doesn't know much about nothing, but that doesn't look like the whole polar ice shelf is melted. Does it to you? I don't think so. I think Al Gore was wrong. Let's go back even further and see what they were saying 43 years ago.
Many scientists claim that the temperature of the Earth's atmosphere has been rising over the past 100 years, that the great sheets of pack ice in Antarctica are melting at a much more rapid rate than previously. And finally, that the sea level has been rising with increasing swiftness over the past 40 years. If these scientists are correct, about 25% of Florida would be flooded, along with low-lying areas all over the world.
According to NASA GRACE data, in 2.5 years since early 2021, Antarctica has added nearly 1,000 gigatons of ice mass. That's almost 1/3 of the total lost since the mission started in 2002.
For decades, the narrative has been one of relentless melting. Images of collapsing glaciers and shrinking ice shelves have become all too familiar. But recently, something unexpected has happened. Scientists using data from satellites have observed an intriguing trend. The Antarctic ice sheet is growing. This unexpected growth, while seemingly small in the grand scheme of things, has surprised many in the scientific community. The primary driver of this unexpected growth is an increase in precipitation. Snowfall, in simple terms, is adding more ice to the continent than is being lost through melting and icebergs breaking off.
According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, March 1980, this is the extent of the sea ice around Antarctica. March 2024, this is now the extent of the sea ice, more than there was in 1980. And as this graph clearly demonstrates, starting 1860, there has been no definable acceleration of the sea levels. And how do I contend with the entire scientific establishment's consensus that we are in for a catastrophic rise in sea levels? Well, as I've outlined in the video, there is no consensus. There are many credible scientists who do not believe this to be the case. So if there is no true consensus, and the science is shaky behind the narrative, why on earth are they pushing this message?
Unlike capitalism, which prioritizes decisions based on the endless creation of products to sell for more profit, eco-socialism advocates for an economy that makes decisions based on the well-being of all people and the planet. Because one of the foundational tenets of eco-socialism must be that the fruits of everyone's labor aren't funneled into the coffers of a single capitalist, but instead distributed according to people's needs.
It's called the Green New Deal, a platform pushed by some Democrats designed to tackle climate change while stimulating the economy.
Because we don't have a choice. We do not have a choice. We have to get to 100% renewable energy in 10 years. There is no other option.
Some of its aims include transitioning the country away from fossil fuels, decreasing the use of carbon in agriculture, transportation, and infrastructure, and aiming to make the economy carbon-free within 10 years. It also seeks to tackle income inequality through a federal jobs guarantee program that assures a, quote, living wage.
Journal of Ethnic and Migration Studies, Preparing for Climate Migration and Integration, a Policy and Research Agenda. In this paper, I review recent research on climate migration, including estimates of the numbers of future migrants owing to climate change. I introduce a typology of climate migration, including strategic, disaster-managed relocation, and trapped populations. I draw on migration theory and findings on the integration of immigrants and refugees to suggest that a good way to manage and prepare for climate migration is for rich countries to allocate extra visas to poorer countries that are suffering the effects of climate migration, partly as reparations for climate injustice. These visas will allow strategic migrants to seed further migration by tying the countries together through social networks, and eventually will provide a co-ethnic community for disaster migrants and relocated communities. I also review research on refugees, suggest questions for researchers to answer on how best to integrate disaster migrants going forward. Finally, I review the growing intersection of climate denialism and anti-immigrant sentiment among right-wing movements. I suggest that planning for the successful integration of large numbers of migrants fleeing climate change should be a top priority, not least because this success will help preserve the social trust that is necessary for successful climate mitigation efforts.